What's up, Cougar Nation, and welcome again aboard the Hype Train podcast. I am your host, Joe Wheat. That's at Joey27 on Twitter. As always, with my boys Hunter Miller and Trevor Levitt. Brethren, this is going to be a little bit of an adventure because my computer, for whatever reason, does not work with StreamYard. So I can see Trevor, but I cannot see or hear Hunter right now. He is currently just a black loading screen on my computer. So going to take a risk. Hunter, how are we doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. I know that all of this is going right over your head. I hope you listen back to this part of the podcast. But got back from the hospital with a sweet baby girl this time last Thursday morning.
Let's go.
Wow, that's so interesting. That's so cool.
He's actually nailing it. He's actually crushing it.
Yeah. So
are you serious?
You are crushing it. Yeah.
He's telling a story about his kids now, so shut up. We'll let him finish.
Okay.
But yeah, so little Scotty, little baby girl, 6 pounds. Mom and baby both doing great. She's really small and really tiny, obviously, as you can imagine, at 6 pounds. But things are going great. A little bit tired last night. She was a rascal, but otherwise been sleeping and eating and just doing all the baby stuff that I guess they do at this point in a week into their lives. She's nailing it, so it's been good.
Love it. She's also been good luck, it seems. Like just a lot of
I think so.
Really good.
Dude, she has been
lost
good luck. I need
basketball
her.
Game
I need her to tell me that I'm gonna win the lottery next. Seriously.
Oh no, Hunter froze.
Am I back?
Oh, he's back. He's back. Okay, good.
It's the bad Wi-Fi. I'm gonna tell my wife to get off the Wi-Fi.
This podcast so far has been a little bit like the basketball team. It's pretty good, but just lacks consistency at the moment and connection.
Well, no, it was a great idea in the off season, and now when it's time to actually play games, we can't connect. The chemistry is all off.
Our Wi-Fi is Yegor Demon's 3-point shot right now.
Oh man!
Can you still not see nor hear me, Joe?
I'm
gonna take it as a definitive yes.
No contact has been made with Hunter yet, Joe.
Oh no. Okay. Well, I guess you and I will just have a recording session. Trevor, let me just say your background looks amazing. We got the Zach, like we just moved into a new house. Things are looking up for everybody. Hunter's got a new baby. I'm vibing. No kids to report yet. I did want to start off the show by saying shout out to all of our wives for letting us participate in this stupid thing that we call a podcast. It is a Thursday night. It is 8:00. There's a lot of things that we can be doing as good husbands to help out around the house that our wives are just willingly allowing us to just come up and talk sports as friends for like an hour and a half every single week. And so thank you to our wives, especially my beautiful wife, Michaela, who does not listen to the podcast because she, and it's not because she doesn't love BYU sports, and it's not because she doesn't love me. I think my mom and Michaela listen to this. And so if I happen to die at some point, they have something where they can hear my voice. So if you're hearing this, Michaela, it means I've died. And I just want you to know that I love you, and hopefully you never have to listen to this, but you're the best thing that ever happened to me.
That was both sweet and bleak.
How's that for a morbid way to start off the show?
Joe and I are in sync, despite not seeing nor hearing me.
The chemistry, the thing is this is exactly, so Hunter just said that the chemistry is here, even though you can't see and hear each other. This is exactly how I view the BYU basketball team. I think it's coming. Like, I think we're going to figure it out. It's just, we're just not quite there yet. But you guys do, like, for the people that can't like see this on YouTube, like, they'll have no idea.
Well, dude, it's gonna be a pretty big adventure, and it's gonna be cool because now when I listen back to the podcast, I'm gonna be hearing a third of it for the first time.
It's like watching a movie again for the first time.
Oh my gosh, no! This is definitely been, like, you brought up the wives, Joe. Like, moving into a new house, still allowing me to do this, like, The dishes, I still am gonna have to do the dishes later. That's like
Same.
we're not putting off our husband duties. They've just been, or excuse me, we're not doing our husband duties. They're just being pushed off. But yeah, I mean, Hunter's got a new kid. I look at like just, we talked about this on the 100th episode, but just the amount of things that have changed over, what is it now, 106 episodes, and we're gonna be doing our third Hypie Awards. This is cool. This is something that I've really enjoyed. So glad we get to do this.
Joe left.
I'm taking a chance here.
Okay, he's still Casey. I'm going to kick him from this whole thing, and we'll see what happens. I'm removing him, kicking him from the studio. I had an option to ban. So now that I know that is an option, we'll see if I use that moving forward. But yeah, it is kind of crazy. I think my wife wasn't so much like reluctant to let me do this tonight, but more so was like, yes, please go do something other than like sit on the couch and watch The Office, which is what we've been doing for the last week, just because like Scotty eats and then sleeps for 3 hours at a time and then wakes up and eats for 15 minutes and then goes back to sleep. So it's like we've just been binge watching shows. So it's like I've gone through, I think, like seasons 3 and 4 of The Office. And it's like the extended super fan episodes too, just in the last week. So I think the fact that there's like something to do, she was like, yes, please, like go do something other than doing nothing. I've also been like working still, which she was not a fan of that move of me being like, yes, let me do this thing for work real quick.
Dude, honestly, shout out to Rachel though. Like, she's doing well, I presume. Like,
she's doing great. Yeah, she's thriving now that she's like not pregnant anymore. She's feeling real good. So like, I know obviously it's like unique, like everyone's different. Immediately having a baby and like the first couple of days in the hospital, she just kind of took it easy. But since we've been back, she's like feeling good. Like obviously a little sore, but other than that, like straight chilling. So it's been good.
Good for her, man. Superheroes, women and mothers specifically.
I don't know how Joe and I are going to get in sync here. Trevor is going to be I was going to say Joy Taylor. But
Please don't say Joy Taylor ever again.
Might not be a good one right now. You will be our Molly Karam to my Shannon Sharp and Joe's Stephen A. In this episode, because we're going to need a mediator to communicate what I'm telling him.
Okay. I mean, let's start with this then. Since Joe, can you hear me still? Joe is frozen.
Joe might not be able to hear anyone.
Episode. I'm actually.
It's off the rails.
Okay, fine. While he's sorting himself out, Hunter, like 11-5, BYU basketball. We've made some jokes. We've had some things to say about it. Like, for them to turn this around, like what do they have to do? Like, what are you seeing? What's not happening that you would want to see that is going to ultimately change this?
I mean, the biggest and easiest thing to point to is like your star players need to play like star players. Yegor, I think before this last game, before the second half of like the Oklahoma State game, I think Yegor was like 1 for 18 from 3 in Big 12 play. Was not shooting good. You saw what happened. Like Oklahoma State went on a huge run to start the second half, came back, got within like 3 or 4 points. And then Yegor kind of turns it on and is able to, start knocking down some shots. He had a great sequence of, which is really kind of what ignited to his run and the BYU run where they inevitably pulled away again at the end. But he had a blocked it out of bounds. They inbound the ball. He steals it, goes down, takes a shot, misses, but gets fouled. He hits 2 free throws. And that was kind of like, you can see him kind of working through those things. He's always had great court vision. Like despite him, not making shots, he's been still a good facilitator, which was his biggest strength coming into the year anyway, coming over from Barcelona and Russia. But you can see, like, I think him finding ways to impact the game and make winning plays aside from shooting and aside from 3-point shooting in particular, I think it's good for him and good for him mentally to be able to be like, okay, like the shots aren't falling, but I can still make winning basketball plays elsewhere. I think another one is obviously going to be Cannon Catchings. He's struggled recently as well. Like these were the two guys that coming into the year were supposed to be the guys. We're supposed to be, first round NBA draft picks and the catalyst for this BYU basketball team. And so far they've both struggled, which is, to be fair, they're 18-year-old, both of them 18-year-old freshmen, and that's just going to happen. That's the reality of the situation. So neither of them was as polished as what like an AJ DeBanza will be next year, but they're going to be a bit of a learning curve. Unfortunately, I think both of their NBA draft stock has fallen a little bit. But I mean, it's early. Like it's early in Big 12 play. They can get back. I think BYU can go on a little bit of a run. You want to win. Obviously this game on Saturday against Utah is going to be a big one on the road. There's 0-3 on the road this year, so you want to get a road win. But yeah, there's nothing that I'm seeing on the court that's like unfixable, where it's like, okay, this is a glaring weakness that I think BYU is not going to be able to overcome. Everything seems to be, they're just going through a bit of a slump, and it's like multiple players going through a bit of a slump at any given time. So your hope is that they are able to work through it. It's a coaching staff too that's kind of getting used to it. Like the NBA and the college game is different, and really the one main coach on the BYU basketball team that has college experience is Chris Burgess. Like the rest of the guys are like NBA and like G League guys that came to the college ranks. So you want to be able to give them time for like your 18-year-olds and Cannon and Yegor to be able to adapt to the college game, get their feet under them. For Yegor, he's like playing in a completely different country on the other side of the globe. And for the coaching staff, it's like you've got to adapt to like, here's how the college game is played. Here's how college basketball spacing works. And I think just right now you have half the roster and 95% of the coaching staff that are still trying to learn all those nuances. So give it time. Nothing like I'm not hitting the panic button yet. The TCU game was close. I said I wasn't going to do the fraud or squad meter this year. Then the TCU game happened and I was like, frauds. The Oklahoma State game's got it going back a little bit more towards a squad, but I think the Saturday's game in Salt Lake is going to be the most telling so far.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it on the head. I look at Cannon and I look at Yegor, and like you said, like the talent is there. It feels like because they're young, and I think we see this, like if you look at guys like Trevin Nell, Dallin Hall, Richie Saunders, I think is probably the best example of this. Like the young guys are more easily swept in by the emotions of the game, which is why you have these super high highs, like against Oklahoma State, where all of a sudden you jump up by 30 points and everything's going good and everybody's hitting shots and everything looks great. And then there's all of a sudden just these chasms of lows because the momentum shifts. And it seems to hit both of those two pretty hard, which I don't think is super surprising. I think that's something that with their age, like you're going to get the benefit of them playing with emotion. And then you're going to get these moments where the lights get really bright. And you look at like Richie Saunders, like Trevin Nell, like Dallin Hall, like those guys can kind of, maybe the super highs aren't there, but the lows aren't there either. They're just more even keeled. And I just think as the season progresses, as they're playing teams, as they're learning to kind of find their identity, like Yegor, the second things went wrong, or the second thing started going well for him yesterday. You mentioned that sequence, like the steal, the block, the free throws, and then he finally hits his second three of Big 12 conference play, and he's talking smack, like he's cussing out the point guard on the other team, and it's just one of those things where when they can kind of find a way to play a little bit more level-headed, I think Cannon Catchings and Yegor are going to just take this team to new heights.
First of all, hello. First off, hello, Hunter. It's good to see your face. Second thing,
We're back.
I agree with absolutely everything that Trevor said and Hunter said. I'm sure it was great. No, I agree with both of you that like the issue on the team right now is youth, right? Like this team plays like they haven't played together before. And it shows but the comforting thing is like this team isn't that far away. Like the Houston game notwithstanding, Houston getting blown up by 20, that's kind of its own can of worms. Houston's just a really good basketball team, but like that Texas Tech game, I mean, if you beat Texas Tech and TCU and you don't blow it in the final 5 minutes, BYU is squarely in the tournament right now. That's 2 quad one wins right there that BYU would have been able to rack up. And it stinks to blow that opportunity, especially that opportunity against Texas Tech. I think that's one that was a really winnable game that we're going to want back. But the good news for the team is that it was winnable, right? Like I don't think that this isn't a BYU team that's been like outmatched physically. They've just been out executed in key moments. And that's kind of that's kind of been the story of the season so far. Like you lose the Ole Miss game. That was a quad one opportunity. You were winning that game late and lost it in the final minutes. Like what this team is missing right now is a second reliable scorer outside of Richie Saunders. Like to me, it almost feels like the only way that BYU is going to win basketball games is if Richie Saunders goes for 25 points. And that's not a sustainable strategy. There needs to be somebody on this team who can go and get their own shot late in games like Jackson Robinson did last year. We thought that would be Jaeger Demon, and I think we saw a little bit of that at the end of the Oklahoma State game where he started getting a little bit more aggressive, started driving a little bit more, started finishing around the rim. We thought it was going to be Cannon Catchings, and he just hasn't been able to find his stride yet. Like really the issue with this basketball team right now is there's no reliable scorers outside of Richie.
This isn't a BYU like specific issue either. Like there are teams, it's just like college basketball in general, right? When you're dealing with 18-year-old kids, that the jump from like high school basketball to college basketball is a huge jump. And then the jump from college basketball to the NBA is a huge jump. Like Rutgers has 2 of the projected top 5 picks, Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, and they're 9-8 and 14th place in the Big Ten. Like talent doesn't always mean hard line wins, losses in college basketball. I think, in the text we were talking about right now, BYU has good basketball players, but they're a mediocre basketball team right now. And I think that, as the season goes on, and unfortunately, it kind of the team was set back because of Dallin Hall's injury to start the year, right? Like a lot of the learning curve needed to have happened, especially the fact that it's Yegor and Dallin, kind of 2 point guards playing on the court together. Like that needed to have built up some chemistry in the offseason. And when BYU was playing Westminster and Florida A&M and like these other schools to start the season, instead it kind of started late, and now you're seeing them try to play catch up where they're trying to coexist on the basketball court together, which has led to some hiccups, I think.
Well, and I think like the Dallin and Jaeger thing has kind of been the biggest issue, right? Like I think when it was just Dallin, or it was just Jaeger at the beginning of the year, where it was very clear Jaeger's going to take the ball up. He's going to be the one that's handling the ball in pretty much every possession. Like things moved really smoothly. And then when Jaeger got hurt, it was really convenient that Dallin just kind of stepped in and things went pretty smoothly when it was just Dallin Hall. But it's been like, it's just unfortunate that the games that they've played together have been the most important ones, where it's like, it's Ole Miss, it's Providence, it's, all of conference play. And it's just clear that those two have no idea how to coexist together on a basketball court. I actually really like the move of moving Dallin to the bench, running the second team unit with Foose. I think Foose and Dallin have great chemistry because they've been playing together for the last 3 years. So it's like, I think when they're on the floor together, it's clear that the ball just kind of like the offense just kind of feels stagnant because no one knows, like everyone's trying to defer to everybody else. Like Dallin is a very passive basketball player. literally. Like his number one priority is he will have more assists than shots taken in almost every single game he plays, because that's just who he is. Demon is kind of the same guy, but 6'9" and should be a little bit more aggressive in driving. But like, I don't know. It's hard because like the difference for this basketball team right now is I thought Jaeger would be like a 15, a 15, 5 and 6 guy. And right now he's an 11, 4 and 6 guy. Like that's kind of the difference right now for this BYU basketball team is Jaeger is shooting 28% from 3 when he was shooting 50% from 3 over like the first 8 games of the season.
And this is a BYU as a basketball coach that comes from coaching Devin Booker, Chris Paul, Kevin Durant. So like if there's a coach out there that can figure out how Dallin Hall and Jaeger can coexist on a basketball court together, I think it's the guy that helped coach an offense that was led by Chris Paul and Devin Booker. Right? Like those two guys
I agree,
are very similar.
I would say Chris Paul is more of like a Dallin Hall than I think Devin Booker is more of a shooter, is he not? Like
Devin Booker is more of a shooter, but both guys need the ball in their hands in order to be effective. Like Devin Booker is not going out there, obviously to a higher degree than Chris Paul, but Devin Booker is not like an elite move without the ball, Klay Thompson kind of type.
No,
they both need the ball in their hand.
But at least they both have to be guarded on all spots of the floor. Like I think right now you don't have to guard Jaeger at the 3-point line because if he takes the shot right now, he's going to miss it. Like, and hopefully that changes, but that's been the story in conference play. I think he's like 2 for 22 in conference play from 3. And then Dallin, he might be legitimately one of the worst finishers around the rim I've ever seen. But he knocks down 3-pointers. So it's like the issue is when those two are on the ball together, there's really only 3 legitimate players that can score for you. Like it's Richie is going to get the ball, Trevin Nell is going to get the ball, and maybe Keita if he's the guy out there. But like really it's 5-on-3 at that point because you have 2 guys on the floor together that refuse to shoot. And like in terms of like Kevin Young's performance, like I mean, this isn't a bad basketball team. Like I think they're figuring some things out, and I think they're definitely a mediocre basketball team, but I'd be a lot more concerned if like BYU wasn't getting good looks. I'd be really concerned if BYU's like process was bad, but like the offense, like there's opportunities to score there. They're averaging 81 points a game, which is really good. It's just execution in key moments. And that's where like Kevin Young can't shoot the ball for you. Kevin Young isn't the one who took a turnaround fadeaway jumper with the game on the line against TCU. Like it's all execution at that point. And we just need guys to execute better late in games. And this season feels a lot different.
Yeah, I think it's very clear. Like it's execution, I think, as well. Just by the nature of moving to a level of basketball that you haven't head coached before. Like, I think part of the execution problem is the fact that like Kevin Young is kind of trying to figure out
I love it playing with the rotations. Like I actually really do enjoy that every game we're trying something new until something works.
Well, and he voiced that too when they were having kind of their media interviews before games. He explained to the commentators before the Oklahoma State game. Hunter touched on this earlier. Jaeger and Dallin was hurt, and then Jaeger got hurt, and so they're still trying to figure out the lineups. And I'm glad that he is confident enough to be able to continue to tinker with that because. Some coaches would just say, F it, this is what we're working with and ball up top, and it would not work. But instead he's still trying to figure that out. But the other part of it too is obviously he had great players that he was coaching in Kevin Durant and Devin Booker and Chris Paul. And one of the things that comes with great players is a great basketball IQ. And so I'm not trying to say that, he was a fraud in Phoenix because he wasn't, but just the fact that he's going from some of the greatest minds in basketball to a whole new level that he hasn't coached before with players that may eventually develop that. Like Jaeger absolutely can become one of the greats in the NBA. He's got the skill set. He's got the frame. but can he get there mentally? He's not working. It's not Chris Paul running the point right now. And so how do you coach that? How do you help him see what somebody like Chris Paul sees? How do you help, Trevin Nell understand like and move like a Bradley Beal or a Devin Booker or one of these guys? And I think while execution is probably the biggest issue, I think there is an underlying issue of how do you coach that execution, when before you had guys that have been in the league for 10 plus years, Hall of Fame guys that probably don't need to be told very often what to do. Once Kevin Young's game plan is implemented, if that makes sense. Like he could just say, hey, we're going to run, this type of offense. Kevin, you're here. Chris, you're here. And they're probably like, got it. Like, let's do it. And then now you're with a bunch of college guys that are like, huh? So I think it's a medley of both. And like we've already touched on, at ad nauseum here, like they'll figure it out. It'll be fine.
And like Yegor, again, I mentioned this earlier, like shooting struggles, yes, but he still is second on the team in points per game, second on the team in blocks, first in steals, first in assists, and third in rebounds. Like he's still impacting the game in other ways, which I think is, again, for an 18-year-old kid that's playing in a new league with new teammates in a new country, speaking, a new language, like find ways that you can impact wins and impact a basketball team that isn't 3-point shooting. And I think when you do that, you'll start to see the shots fall at a higher clip. Which is exactly what happened in the second half against Oklahoma State, right?
Right. And I think law of averages, like he's not going to be shooting this poorly forever. Like I think he's a better shooter than 2 for 20 or whatever it is. And to your point, Hunter, like he's maybe not like the Jimmer level of production that we hoped for. And of course that's like hype train off season. Like, we're dreaming big about this guy. He hasn't, and I know I was Jaeger Demon hater number one in the group chat, but like he hasn't been bad. Like to your point, like he is impacting the game in other ways. He's been solid on defense. He's by far the best passer on the team. He has the best IQ. Like he's the reason the offense goes still. And he's a true freshman. Like in terms of true freshman at BYU, he's probably been one of the best ever. But with the expectations coming in, it just kind of feels like, and this is our fault. Like we set the expectation too high for Yegor. But the thing is like, if he's not going to be that guy who's going to take over games late, there needs to be somebody else who can step up. Which again, we're just not seeing that right now, but it kind of feels like everyone's doing a moratorium on this team. Like they're still in tournament contention. Like all they need is 1 or 2 quad 1 wins over the next couple weeks, and they're going to be right back in the conversation for the NCAA tournament. Like there's going to be so many opportunities for this team to get right. And they're not that far away. Like we obviously hope that they can figure it out sooner rather than later, but I don't think that the season is already lost. I think they just, like, you need Dallin Hall to be better than last in made shots per minute played.
I will say the silver lining in this is where, if you would have asked me 2 weeks ago, what's the percentage chance that Yegor Demon comes back for a second year at BYU, I would have said 0%. If you asked me that question today, the answer would not be 0%. And that's not just because of like I never said I was one and done. Like I genuinely think that a second year could, if he continues to play well, not great throughout the rest of the year, and sees himself in like a 15 to 25 projected NBA draft pick, I think there's a real chance that he says, you know what, one more year, come back a second year in Kevin Young's system, playing with AJ DeBansa and Xavier Stanton. Like that, I think, is a growing possibility. So if you want to say like this year haven't lived up to expectations, which he and the rest of the team have not to this point, the benefactor is maybe next year's BYU basketball team, in the sense that like Yegor could consider coming back for a second year and play with AJ DeBansa, which would be unreal.
And that was kind of my take during the TCU game was, this team reminds me a lot of that last WCC team that was extremely young, was playing a lot of true freshman Richie, true freshman Dallin, and they were close. Like they played Gonzaga close, they played St. Mary's close, but they just couldn't pull out games at the end. But that experience served them well, and they learned from those losses and became a much better team next year. I think this team is in the exact same tier, or the exact same category of they're close, they're losing games close. It's just a matter of closing out games late. Like there's a good team in there. And this experience is what will serve them better next year. The problem is Demon and Catchings presumably are one and dones. And now you're doing this all over again with 2 more one and dones next year, which is in theory, it's a great problem to have. But like college basketball is for old guys. Like it's a much different type of game than the NBA. There's a reason Kentucky's kind of fallen off a cliff. Like those days of Anthony Davis being like this crazy one and done type guy, Zion Williamson, and who was the other guy at Duke with him that plays for the Knicks? RJ Barrett. Like the days of those guys kind of dominating.
Joe has not watched NBA basketball in like 2 years.
Has anybody watched NBA basketball in 2 years?
No. Aside from the Celtics when they get to the playoffs, no.
But regardless, like it's just the pendulum is shifted back to old guys and experienced guys in college basketball, and there's plenty of that on this BYU team. Like there's a reason Richie has been the best guy, Foose has been the best guy because they've been here the longest. So
Perry Ellis's of BYU.
Yeah, and you look at Iowa State, you look at Houston, those aren't one and done guys. Those are old dudes, transfers who, and in some cases, have been playing together for a long time. So it's just a matter of finding the right pieces. The one thing that gives me hope is the longer this team plays together, the better they're going to be. And so if they can find a way to get into the NCAA tournament, I feel a lot better about this team than other NCAA tournament teams in the past, because I think they'll be peaking at the right time. Similar to some of those Kentucky one and done teams did, where they struggled early on, but managed to figure it out late in the year.
Any other BYU basketball thoughts?
That about bled me dry, man. I'm still getting back into basketball.
Because we've got a BYU football commit to talk about before we get to our award nominees.
Oh my dude, how could I forget? McKay Madsen? Second year in a row, we got BYU getting commits during the Navy All-American game. How about that?
Can we get him an M&M NIL deal?
Yeah,
I want that. I think that'd be dope.
I think my favorite thing about him was one. Before you jump in, Hunter, can I kind of tell the story
Please.
of? So,
I mean, we were getting some interesting texts the night before. I think you got a clearer timeline, though.
So McKay Madsen, for those of you who don't know, BYU's latest 4-star commit. He's kind of like if Harrison Taggart and Luke Staley had a baby. He's like 6'2", 235.
Oh, he's Hercules
and linebacker. Like he's nuts. But he was getting chased by Oregon hard, and up until about 3 days before his commitment last Saturday, all the word was Oregon was going to be the place. And like 2 days before,
he was still crystal balled to Oregon like that morning, wasn't he?
Well, he got crystal balled to Oregon like last June, and then again last December, like right after his visit. And it was just like, and when you get those crystal balls on 24/7, it's over. And so we're all thinking like, oh man, it's kind of over. It's like linebackers, like BYU's been able to find good linebackers, but it's still a huge hit when that kid doesn't commit to BYU. And then the night, like 2 days before the commitment announcement, I got a text from a coach. He's like, hey, go blow up McKay Madsen socials. Like, go show him some love. Like, I think we got a real shot with this kid. And I see, like, I'm seeing texts from, Kelly Papinga and other BYU coaches who are like, yeah, like, let's get this guy hyped up. I guess he had a conversation with Harrison Taggart, who was a former Oregon player, who kind of gave him the rundown of what it was like to play for Dan Lanning. And what Madsen said was to Taggart was, I know that I'm just going to go on my mission and want to come to BYU and be surrounded by the gospel in college. And so if that's what I want after my mission, why wouldn't I commit to BYU before my mission? And that was kind of the story. To which I say that kid was always coming to BYU. Like, are you kidding me? Like during the high school all-star game, they're showing pictures of him doing like music theater and what only can be described as like the Nauvoo pageant. He's an Eagle Scout. He was the Navy All-American Game Man of the Year. Like that is a BYU guy through and through. And it would have been, if he didn't come, that would have been devastating for the brand to lose that guy to Oregon. And I just got to say, like, how hard must it be for Dan Lanning to know that you have to recruit against God to land a player? Because like I told Jeff Hansen, like, yo, I think we got a shot with this kid. And he was like, I don't know. It's going to take an act of God. And God spoke.
What did Dan Lanning say? Like when people were complaining, like the SEC coaches, he's like, just win. Yeah. It takes a little bit more than just winning, Dan. It appears.
First, Dan Lanning had to cover Jeremiah Smith, and then he had to recruit against God. Like, talk about a tough couple of weeks.
That's tough.
Here was the exact quote. I could totally see myself commit to Oregon and then on my mission be surrounded by the gospel and want to switch up. So why wouldn't I just commit there in the first place?
Yeah.
This is like the quote in the
text. Kid's got a sound mind. Like the logic's there.
He's the exact kid that you want at BYU.
Like, this feels like I almost said the winds of change, but that's trolling. But
I mean, they have
it has a little. So this feels like such a like big like green check mark for the Kalani like cultural kind of addendum that he's had. Like, it's been so clear from the beginning that Kalani Sitake has wanted to be like Lavelle, but he wanted to do it his way. And one of the biggest things that all of these players talk about when they talk about Lavelle, when we had Hema on and he's talking about, that experience with, his dad, it was all about culture. And it's all about people wanting to be at BYU for the reasons that they want, like for the reasons that the gospel can change them, that they are part of a family that cares about them. And it's not just the 4 or 5 years that they're here, but it extends beyond that. And they're surrounded by something that just makes them feel good. And we just saw that made manifest with this kid. He knows that he's going to enjoy the gospel and he just wants to be in the place where that is made apparent. It's one of the things, like if you watch The Cut and you listen to some of Kalani's like post-game speeches, it's very apparent. Like that's a part of what Kalani has built here. And it feels like a cultural win because the culture is God. I mean, like we joke about it, but the culture is the gospel. And Kalani has instilled that in his guys to where Harrison Taggart, like who obviously is such a good on the nose pick to talk to Madsen and be like, hey, I was at Oregon and now I'm at BYU. And let me tell you why you can just cut the middleman out in my story and just come to BYU in the first place. And it meant something to this recruit. And so I just, like, it was a cultural win against Colorado. It's a cultural win now in recruiting. And we talked earlier about like how much this podcast has changed. Like loving and learning has taken on a whole new meaning for me than where it was about 3 years ago. And because it's working, like, and love takes time. And here we are. So big cultural win for Kalani. And dude, I just can't wait to see this kid play. He's a beast on the offensive side of the ball. He's physical. Just, I know we probably hate the name right now, but he kind of runs a little bit like Scattaboo. And he also happens to play linebacker. Like Tyler Algier, anyone that just seems like a good combo.
A real Harvey Longy type.
It's so fun watching BYU recruits film and just being like blown away again. and just thinking, man, we're getting this kid. Like watching AJ DeBansa still show up on Sports Center and Bleacher Report, like occasionally on my Instagram feed, and I'm just like, that's a kook. And then like watching McKay Madsen and like Hunter, I can't remember when we talked about Hunter Clegg committing, but like things are trending up. Like these are the kind of guys that BYU wasn't getting 3 years ago, that now BYU is a viable option because they're competitive with NIL, they're competitive on the field, they're competitive in the locker room, they're competitive financially, like all of these things that have been working against BYU for so long, that now they're a force. They, dare I say, run this state.
Speaking of loving and learning, I'm learning that BYU football kicks butt, and I'm loving every second of
it. Bars.
Dude, the
Put that on a
loving
quote
and learning
graphic.
thing, like the loving and learning thing, like it drives everyone nuts when you're losing, but that's the reason the team stays when you're losing. Because a lot of these other cultures that are built on like this really militaristic style, when they start losing games, guys start checking out because it's a lot harder. I don't know what you're talking about. Man, it's just fun, man. Like things are so good for BYU right now. And I don't know, I'm enjoying every bit of it.
Another little fun tidbit, and then we'll get to the nominees. Cam Rising's Utah career ends with 0 wins versus BYU.
It's a good stat.
Just throwing out the strat of the day randomly. No rhyme or reason, just kind of number I thought interesting.
Can I just wanted to, sorry, I was filibustering. Not my podcast. So in terms of this recruiting class, to kind of put a little bit of a bow on it, not sure if it's done yet. Next signing day is February 4th. But in terms of averages, like this is how much BYU is improving. The average 24/7 rating dating back to 2020, 82, 83.6, 83.9, 85.6, 85.9, 86.84 is the average for the 2025 class.
Seems pretty good.
That's pretty good. That is mid to upper Big 12 type stuff. So adding guys like a Hunter Clegg, adding guys like a McKay Madsen, like, again, these are guys that BYU wasn't getting. In terms of competing offers, BYU landed 3 guys with more than 17 competing Power 5 offers. That's ridiculous. Let's see, they added 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys with more than 14 competing offers, period. It's a different era of BYU recruiting, man. It's exciting. And this next year, there's some dudes that BYU has a real shot with that are pushing 5-star right now. So it's exciting.
Speaking of exciting, it's award season. So
Let's go.
It was a Golden Globes a couple
season.
weeks ago. Golden Globes, like NFL awards are in the next couple of weeks. It's just award season in general. I am not a Nikki Glazer type Golden Globes host, but I will present the nominees for each of these awards, and then you guys can give just kind of your brief thoughts on each one, and why kind of these guys are highlighted. So we'll kick it off with Breakout Player of the Year, and the nominees are JoJo Phillips, Harrison Taggart, Isaiah Glasker, and Tanner Wall.
I get to talk about Glasker, right? Since he was my fall camp MVP guy I was talking about for the last 3 years.
Not to spoil it, but Glasker is on, I think, a lot of these nominees lists.
All right, then I'll save it because Glasker's gonna win award a lot better than what is it? Newcomer of the Year.
Breakout Player of the Year.
Breakout Player of the Year.
Newcomer.
So I'm not going to talk about him. I'll talk about Tanner Wall just because he's an absolute dog. Whenever a play needed to be made, it felt like Tanner Wall was in position to make that play. He was all over the field. It's beautiful that one of the last plays of the season was him snapping a Colorado receiver in half and with leading to an interception by Evan Johnson. Like, dude just makes plays. I really appreciate him for it. And sneakily, one of the most athletic guys on the team. I can't put my finger on why I wouldn't think he's athletic, but came in as a walk-on, came in as a wide receiver of all things, and worked his way onto the field playing defense. Real humble guy. Hasn't even taken a scholarship yet because he wants to, keep room for other guys. But Tanner Wally's a special player, and I'm glad he's on our team.
Yeah, big momentum shift with his pick against Arizona. Like, everything was just downhill for Arizona after that. Geez, any of the new we just talked about him. Harrison Taggart, stud on the field, apparently a stud recruiter as well. Everybody on that defense looked good against Colorado, but got a made a big time play, sacking Shedeur Sanders. Fantastic celebration right after. The guy's just all over the field. Breakout player this year. I expect that he's probably going to be in a lot of categories for the Hypie Awards and other, actual football awards next fall, because he's going to be able to be a leader. Just insane athleticism, just big play after big play throughout the entire year. He had the interception against Kansas State during that onslaught in the third quarter. Really kind of kicked the door in and came in and made a bunch of plays. I love it.
JoJo Phillips, I'll talk about him. He, I think, made his mark obviously earlier in the year before conference play, but I think he showed enough flashes to be confident that, once Chase Roberts and once Darius Lassiter, move on to the NFL, that they've got some good receivers coming up behind those guys. And I think JoJo Phillips is one of them. And then Isaiah Glasgow, obviously, I will talk about as we get to some of these other awards as well. But just the linebackers, both Harrison and Isaiah, we talked coming into the year, like Max Tooley gone, Ben Bywater gone. BYU needed some linebackers to step up and fill those shoes, because obviously Max is in the NFL and Ben was an NFL caliber guy before he had to medically retire. So those two guys, big shoes to fill. And I think both Isaiah and Harrison did a big job in helping fill those shoes. And the BYU defense, obviously unreal. Another one of those guys that helped fill those shoes is a nominee for newcomer player of the year. The nominees are Jack Kelly, another linebacker, Mark Collins, Sione Moa, and Tommy Parasis. So these are four guys where this was their first year in the BYU program. Which nominee, I guess, would you guys like to highlight?
I got Parasis. I'll start right with Parasis right now. Like, I think, and we even had our thoughts about, were there times maybe where he was out of position this year? And I think the answer to that is yes. But Tommy Parasis was so Johnny on the spot, like, so many times throughout the season, that after a while, it's not luck. You can't look at that as luck. The guy has great ball instincts. He knows where plays are going to be made, and he gets himself there. I don't want to be like too dramatic, but kind of almost a season-changing play against Kansas State, that fumble recovery for a touchdown, where it just felt like the cover at LaVell Stadium just blew off entirely, and we just went on this incredible run after that. Like, I think a lot of that came on that play. You've got this true freshman coming in, makes a play that gives BYU the lead, and then from there it just snowballs. And if Tommy Parasis can continue to make plays like that, can continue to be in the right spot, and then add to it kind of just total game IQ, know where he needs to be at all times. Like, he's wearing 22. He might be Andrew Rich 2.0. And so I think that's one guy that I'm really looking forward to seeing him another year with Jay Hill's system, where he can kind of learn the ins and outs and the little nuanced things, so he just knows where to be at all times. And I'm just excited to watch him.
I think his thing is just gaining weight. Like, he looks
that's the other
really
part too. He's just small.
He looks really undersized, but he's a true freshman. He's 18 years old. And he was a really under-recruited guy, but someone that Jay Hill latched onto really early in the last recruiting cycle. And from like the first practice of fall camp, he was running with the ones. So I think he's got a bright future at BYU for sure.
Obviously, Tommy and Sione have, an uphill battle with the fact that they're going up against two kind of senior transfers. Whereas we're talking with, Sione and Tommy as two 18-year-old freshmen. So, but, Sione and Tommy definitely left their mark, but I would be surprised if it's not going to be Mark or Jack here. But a tough call. I think all three of these guys were great in their first year.
Mark might be the most underrated defensive guy that we had. He was a dog.
I don't hate that.
Name a more underrated defensive guy who just balled out.
Mark Collins.
I was going to throw out another corner and say Mo Bamba or maybe Evan Johnson, but I think it's one of those like three corners, right?
I mean, the fact that like he was always where he needed to be. Mark Collins, like he was a sure tackler. Jacob Robinson was awesome. And because of that, Collins got targeted a lot. And he answered the bell. Like he only allowed on catch on 55% of targets, had 2 interceptions to only 3 touchdowns given up all year, on 58 targets. What was the passer rating? 81 passer rating allowed, when targeted. That's pretty darn good. Like the guy was just solid all year long. He was a reliable corner, which BYU's not had a lot of those. And I think he's the biggest reason why I think this was the best cornerback room in BYU history. Even better than last year with Eddie Heckard and Camden Garrett. Like I think he wasn't as disruptive as Eddie Heckard was as a pass rusher, but in terms of a coverage corner, I think he was even better than Eddie.
He also didn't talk as much trash as Eddie did. Eddie wasn't afraid to get in someone's face,
which is a real bummer.
Is that going to cost him an award? It might cost him the Hypie. We don't know.
Offensive Player of the Year nominees are LJ Martin, Jake Retzloff, Chase Roberts, and this guy, which if there was a bounce back Player of the Year award, would be a runaway winner. But Caleb Etienne is the 4th nominee for Offensive Player of the Year.
There's some good picks there. If it's not Chase Roberts, I'm going to be pretty disappointed, because like the impact that Chase Roberts had on this offense when targeted. I need to make sure I get this stat right because it's ridiculous.
I was going to say if it's not LJ Martin, I would be surprised.
Oh man,
this is going to go to because let me talk.
We're going to go to war on this one. Okay, so when targeted, Chase, like in the regular season, when targeted, Jake Retzloff's passer rating when targeting Chase was like 127.9. That would be 3rd in college football for passer rating. When not targeting Chase Roberts, Jake was like 110th in passer rating. Like when a play needed to be made, Chase Roberts was the guy. He had a 77% contested catch rate, which means when in contested catch opportunities, 50-50 balls, he was coming down with that 78% of the time. That is insane. Led the team in first downs with 44. Again, whether it was against Utah, whether it was against Oklahoma State, when the game was on the line, that ball was going to Chase Roberts and he was going to bring it in 78% of the time. That's nuts. Should have been a 1,000-yard receiver.
What if I told you LJ Martin, a running back, had half as many touchdown catches as Chase Roberts, and he only had 10 receptions all year?
That's great. Let me know when LJ is going to do it over the middle with a safety bearing down on him, which he did.
I was just going to say, LJ Martin, 9 total touchdowns, 816 yards from scrimmage yards, and he only played in, I think, 10 games. And even then, I'd say more like 9 games because he, had some injuries early in a couple of the games. So
now here's the question.
I'm just saying,
what is BYU's record without LJ, and what is BYU's record without Chase? Because I think both players won BYU 2 to 3 games.
But they both played in Arizona State and Kansas. So like they both were undefeated, or
So
both had 2 losses.
When LJ wasn't in, I will say this about LJ. When LJ wasn't in, the running game looked like it did last year. As soon as he joined back up, the average yards per carry jumped from like 4 to over 5.3 or something crazy like that. Like when he came back, the running game changed and the offense changed. Like it went from an offense that was outside the top 60 in yards per play to an offense that finished in the top 40, all because he was just so good at finding the hole, making guys miss, and picking up those extra yards.
Here's the thing. What does LJ Martin, Chase Roberts, and Jake Retzloff all need in order to do their job?
The ball.
Big tree.
A good offensive line. And when you look at Caleb Etienne, like when I see when I see Jake Retzloff's game-winning touchdown throw against Oklahoma State, all I see in front of him in all of his glory is Caleb Etienne stonewalling the edge rusher to give him time to make that play. Caleb Etienne last season was the butt of a lot of jokes. And Caleb Etienne this season was the anchor to almost, if not all, of our wins. I just like Jake Retzloff improved this season. LJ Martin, when he wasn't injured, looked really good. Chase Roberts had an incredible season. And I just like don't think that it's a coincidence that this was also Caleb Etienne revenge season. I think you want to look at offensive player of the year. The offense isn't moving. Like 3 of those 4 guys are not moving like they are or having the season like they have. If someone isn't keeping them clean and upright, that's all I'm going to say.
It's hard to get the style points as an offensive lineman, right? And I think the Hypies are a style points award.
He was the only one. He was the only.
This isn't the
to find
Heisman.
out what kind of award it is.
Well, he was the only first team All Big 12 player. He was the only first team All Big 12 player BYU had. I mean, there's some good picks here. I feel bad that none of us picked Jake, but and they're all coming back.
As good as
allegedly
the picks are on the offense, the defensive. This might be our most highly contested.
This is a dogfight. This will be a dogfight for sure.
The nominees for Defensive Player of the Year are Jack Kelly, Tyler Batty, Isaiah Glasker, and Jacob Robinson. There's
that's
one person that I know I would vote for, but I do not think it's like it's for me. I looked at the offense and I'm like, yeah, LJ for me, for sure. I look at the defense and I'm like, okay, it's probably this guy, but I think you could make a case for every single one of them. Joe, well, since you're the big Glasker guy, go ahead.
Dude, Glasker was so freaking good this year. So he led the team in tackles.
Yep.
He led the team in interceptions, I believe.
Yep.
He led the team
tied with Tanner Wall and Jacob Robinson for interceptions.
We'll say for the sake of the argument, he led the team. He led the team in tackles for loss.
Yep, he led the conference in tackles for loss.
And
I missed that stat.
I think where was he?
He was second. He was second in 6
on the team in pressures. How many set?
He had 3.5.
4. Yeah,
he had 3.5 sacks.
So he's where was Kelly 4?
Kelly had 5.
Oh, PFF is wrong. How about that?
Or Football Reference is wrong. But
led the team in stops according to PFF. He had
led the team
4th on the team in pass deflections. Led the team in fumble recoveries.
Yeah.
Really, he was like, again, not Kyle Van Noy, but like that level of disruptive for the BYU defense. I'm pushing for Isaiah Glasker to be the MVP of BYU football, not just the Defensive Player of the Year, because he was the best player on the best defense that BYU has had in the last 13 years. Like and then to cap that all off, hitting the shuffle,
The Dirty Bird.
hitting the Dirty Bird shuffle right in front of Dion. It's iconic.
After
And he
picking up
just
his
looks
son.
he just looks like a linebacker, right? Like he's got the neck roll. He's huge. He's 6'5", like 235. He's about as prototypical of a linebacker as I remember BYU having in a long time. Because there were some, like, in those Elisa Tuyaki years, there were some really undersized guys playing linebacker for BYU. And it's 6'4", 245. That dude is a beast. Could have gone a lot of places, and he's choosing to be at BYU. And man, I love him for it. It's just very rare that like someone gets hyped up by the coaching staff so much and they live up to it.
Exceed it even to some extent.
Like
Listen,
he was way better than I ever thought.
I got to give love to Agent Zero. Like Jacob Robinson has been with his team for a long time, and he's seen some great teams. Like he's played on some great teams. He's played on some not great teams. And like just the whole time he has been the same, which is just a shutdown, lockdown corner. The DB room called him Gramps, but then as soon as the season ended, they called him something else. They called him the GOAT. And he might just be BYU's one of, if not the greatest defensive back to come through BYU. Kid was special.
He for sure.
I think he's for sure the best.
Like, the kid's special. He deserves an NFL look. He'll be on the practice squad if at very least. But I think that he came in undersized, started at Utah State, bet on himself, has played big time Power 5 defense, and has accomplished and has done everything you could possibly ask of a DB. And I think he's the GOAT. I think he's the GOAT of BYU cornerbacks. And it's a debate of the best, maybe arguably the best player of this defense this season, with Isaiah Glasgow versus the GOAT. And I think it's fun that we actually get to have this conversation. But yeah, Jacob Robinson, Agent Zero, like special career, man.
I'd be remiss if I did not throw Ben Criddle's hat into the ring of GOAT cornerbacks.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh.
And just because
that might just
Ben
be
because he paid,
a great run of white corners
for a couple of years.
Great run of white corners at BYU.
Let me ask you two questions. First of all, are there more aspects of an MVP than just stats?
Yes.
Second question, and then I'll finish. Who gave the rousing pregame and halftime speeches for the BYU football team?
Tyler Batty.
The Batman.
So if we're going to talk about value, he may not have the stats of a Jack Kelly. He obviously does not have the interceptions of a Jacob Robinson. He did have more, or I think as many sacks, similar sacks to an Isaiah Glasgow. Maybe not as many tackles for a loss as Isaiah Glasgow. But Tyler Batty made an impact both on the field and off the field. He was their obviously clear locker room leader, as we all saw and heard against Arizona State. Like, he was the guy that was rallying the troops anytime BYU needed someone to kind of light that fire from a player side of things. So I think, we sit here and we talk about this guy had this many stats, this guy did this on the field. But when we're talking about who's the most valuable guy on the defense, I think we got to look at who the leader was in the locker room, as well as had a big impact on the field as well. So
that pregame speech against Colorado was a banger. I mean, that was, like not even like Arizona State aside, like that pregame Colorado, they played like Colorado State, that Colorado bowl game.
And it was only, amen. And it, like, in terms of stats, it was only sacks that he was like underwhelming in. It's disappointing when your star defensive end has as many interceptions as sacks. But he had as many interceptions as sacks as a defensive end. That's pretty awesome. He was also second in the Big 12 in QB hits. He was second in the Big 12 in pressures. For whatever reason, the quarterback just takes one step to the left and gets the ball out right before getting crunched by Tyler Batty, which if Tyler Batty was bearing down on me, I'd want to get rid of the ball as soon as humanly possible too.
Well, the thing is too, is like, I understand that it doesn't result in a loss of yards, but if they're throwing the ball away, it's a stop. It's a defensive stop.
There's a legitimate argument that he should be credited with more interceptions because of the pressure he was putting on quarterbacks.
And I mean, he also sent he almost sent Fafita into like the 13th row towards the end of that game.
Look, and it's like 42 pressures is insane. That is a ton. First in the conference was 43 with BJ Green from Colorado. Like I think Tyler Batty could get an NFL look. I really do. I think he's going to show out at the combine.
Brent Coleman loves him.
Yeah, I saw that. Like, I think like he'll probably be an undrafted free agent, but like I think he's going to get a legitimate look in the NFL.
I said defensive player of the year would be the most highly contested. This one actually might be the most highly contested. Our special teams player of the year for the first time. I think we got 3 guys that like actually could make a serious case for this award. Those 3, as I'm sure everyone can guess, is Will Ferrin, Parker Kingston, and Keelan Marion. Will Ferrin obviously nails all season long, hit the game winner against Utah. Parker Kingston, a couple of punt returns for touchdowns, including that electric one against Kansas State, but then he also got one in the bowl game against Colorado. And then Keelan Marion, who returned multiple kicks for a touchdown, including one against Utah as well. And like for the first time in maybe BYU history, at least since the 90s, like BYU was dangerous in the kick return game and had multiple kicks and punts returned for touchdown in a single season. But then you're going up against a kicker that, never missed.
And not just dangerous, like actually lethal. I'm going to go out on a limb and say Will Ferrin is the most important transfer portal addition since Puka Nacua. Sneaky pick, but like he hit the game tying field goal against Oklahoma State last year. He missed like his first kick of the year against SIU, and then didn't miss pretty much the rest of the year.
Ever again.
Like I'm looking at his game log right now. This is his game log. He was 2 for 3 against SIU, missed 50+ yarder against SMU, but went 2 for 2 against Wyoming, 1 for 1 against Kansas State, 2 for 3 against Baylor, 2 for 2 against Arizona, 1 for 1, 3 for 3, 3 for 3, 2 for 2, 1 for 1, 1 for 1, 1 for 1. Like the guy was automatic. After the Baylor game, he missed 3 kicks in the first 5 games and didn't miss again. And those are like the game-winning kick against Utah will go down as one of the all-time great moments in BYU history. A 44-yard field goal while wearing 44 in that stadium, like just chef's kiss. One of my favorite players to ever come through BYU.
He led the conference in made field goals and in total points scored. And then, like you said, 41 for 41, 100% on extra points. Pretty incredible. And then again, like BYU never returns kicks for touchdowns. And then you have 2 guys, your punt returner and your kick returner, who had multiple. So it's this one, I think, honestly, might be the most.
Will Ferrin is also a Davis Dart. So
I'm really curious. I'm really curious if he went 4 for 5 of kicks over 50 yards, which is crazy. Like there was a stretch where BYU didn't hit a 50-yard field goal for like 15 years, and Will Ferrin just is stepping up and knocking him down.
The future's now, old man.
Seriously. Hold tight. I need to see where he stands in the in the country in terms of making 50-yard kicks. Go ahead.
Okay. While you do that, I am going to rep the man who reps a place that I love, Atlanta, Keelan Marion. Like the guy, I think it's one thing. Like I was a kick returner in high school. I'm not going to pretend that it's the same, but when you look at Colorado, or excuse me, Wyoming, there's some argument to be made there that like, yeah, like big time return, but it's Wyoming, right? You did it on the biggest stage in the most hostile environment you could possibly create for yourself, to give yourself the lead, to most importantly reel back in some momentum that you had lost in this game against Utah, who had decided to, kind of wake up, obviously, as rivals do. And you just, the guy is so dangerous. Like, you hear the term like speed kills, like he's the Punisher. Like, the guy just punishes you if you kick it to him. And he is going to have at least one more, if not a couple more seasons to just show just how dangerous he is. He's got the track speed. He has the vision to go with it. And he's got the belief. I think that's one of the biggest things that might be one of the biggest reasons why he deserves this award, is that Cougar Nation for the first couple of weeks was just screaming at him to just take a touchback. Like, take the ball out to the 25, call it good. We're sick and tired of ending with the starting with the ball at the 15. And he bet on himself. And I think to be a great kick returner, to be a great return specialist, just in general, you have to have that belief that it's going all the way every time you catch that ball. And he did it twice. And he did it in just fantastic fashion. And for me, I don't know. I love his energy. I love that he loves LaVell Edwards Stadium. He loves The Rock. He talks about them all the time in the cut. Anytime they pan to him, he's talking about how LaVell Edwards is going to get rocking. Like, he's a BYU guy, and he's doing things at BYU that haven't been done in years, and he did it more than once.
By the way, I did. Will Ferrin finished 11th in the country in field goals from 50 yards or more. He finished 4th in field goals made. And what was it? 16th in field goal percentage. So pretty good.
Not too shabby.
There's a part of me that really wants Keelan Murray to win this award, because he should have gone first team All Big 12, and he didn't.
That's
and
ridiculous.
It makes me mad.
First team All American.
It makes me really mad.
What kind of conference is this? Would have been first team All Independent, I'll tell you that much. Actually, maybe not. I think Notre Dame has got a pretty good returner. Nominees for, we'll do these two quick. I did turn my camera off. My wife was dropping off the baby so she could take the dogs out. Game of the year nominees. I'm sure you can guess which four we're going to go with, but Oklahoma State, Utah, Kansas State, and Colorado.
Colorado, legitimately.
Oh, that was quick. I don't know.
It's hard.
Over Utah or Kansas? I mean, I would say Colorado is third on that list of best. Just kidding. That was dumb.
It's the
best
on
the list of best teams they played.
It was the best win of the season for sure. It was better than Kansas State, because Kansas State, for the narrative, Kansas State was awesome. They also got the ball inside the 20-yard line like 3 times. Colorado was just an absolute
team than Colorado, though.
Kinda.
If only they played and we could have known.
I know, but it was a close game. They were pretty close, and BYU beat them. They just beat Colorado like a drum in all 3 phases. Legitimately, the only reason it's not number 1 is because it wasn't in LaVell Edwards Stadium. Like, the fact that Kansas State wide out in those jerseys, in that situation, like that, probably the best game I've ever been to a LaVell Edwards Stadium.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so Joe, I'm going to be honest. Which one did you represent there? Was that Colorado? Was that
Yes.
Kansas State? I couldn't.
Yes, I'm gonna say Colorado because it was the best one of the season at the time of the year when everyone was doubting BYU the most. Everyone thought BYU was a fraud even at the end of the year, and they go out and kick Colorado's butt. That was pretty awesome.
I love it. I am gonna go with Kansas State. That was a season changing game, and it was one of those where
low-key a program changing game.
It legitimately might have been like just the
belief that instilled,
like everything that lined up. You have the incredible retro jerseys, the 90s theme, like everything, the drones, like everything about that game was just unbelievable, and the team responded in kind, like, to all of that. And that's just something that we've talked about before, where just BYU sometimes just struggles to meet the moment, and BYU's media team, like their fan experience, like all of them created this environment for something special to happen. And the football team ran away with it. Parker Kingston ran away with it. Tommy Prassis ran away with it. Tyler Batty took it from Avery Johnson. Like I just everything
Harrison
about
Tiger,
that game they could do. Yes, Harrison Tiger. They could do no wrong in that game. And I just, that to me, Colorado doesn't happen without Kansas State. Utah maybe still happens, but probably doesn't happen without that Kansas State game. It's similar to my argument before for Caleb Etienne. Like, I just don't know if these other things exist without that Kansas State game. And to me, that's why it's game of the
year. Before I give my pick, and it's not even, I don't even know if it's my pick. Last year I nominated a loss for this category.
How far we've come.
Last year I was like, what about the Oklahoma game where BYU almost won? And this year we're talking about you two both talked about games of your picks, and neither one of them was a comeback win in the final play of the game or the final seconds of the game on the road against your rival. You guys both gave your picks, and neither one of you mentioned the touchdown on the final play, against Oklahoma State. Like, to go down the field in however many seconds it was and, have that insane touchdown to Darius Lester. Like, none of you guys mentioned these games because the other two were so awesome. Like, any other year that, like, Oklahoma State would have been the easy pick, right? Like, Utah, any year prior to this, like a win over Utah, like, that's the pick. But because this year was so awesome, there's multiple games to pick from. And for that reason, I will abstain. I will say maybe not Kansas State. It should have been Kansas State after years of leading the charge of wear your 96 throwbacks. All the minutes I spent on Photoshop making pictures of Malik Moore and Lapini Katoa in 96 throwback uniforms. They finally did it. Should have been a momentous occasion. Am I hurt that I didn't get to run the flag out with the team for all my hard work and for leading the charge? A little bit. But I'm not going to hold it against them. I might still vote Kansas State, but it's hard not to pick the rivalry win too.
Look, I'm going to go out. I'm going to give you an even hotter take. Utah's not even in the top 5 wins this year.
That's a shot because Utah wasn't good this year.
Colorado, better.
Okay, I see the argument.
Kansas State, better.
I see the argument.
Oklahoma State, because I was there and how awesome that was to be there in the final minute.
I think there is an argument. I don't know how strong
one. Arguments are starting to be made.
SMU was better.
Oh, yeah.
SMU was so ugly, though. Like,
but they beat a playoff team on the road. That's SMU a better win than Utah.
Very much revisionist history.
A better win.
Yeah.
But if we're talking like a rivalry win, road, the manner in which you won.
And this one's just hating Baylor because Baylor was an 8-win team.
Yeah, now you're
on
hating.
The road.
You're just like, this is a more impressive win because they were a better team. I mean, Utah beat Baylor too.
Look,
if you want to talk about
that Utah game was one of the most miserable experiences of my life until the final 10 minutes. I can't.
But you also went from like the game is over on the 4th down It was the total package because you're like,
I
you
get
had
it.
the kickoff return. It was back and forth, and you're like, this game is over. And then you're like, wait, it's not over. We got the first down on the holding penalty, clear and obvious holding penalty. And then you go down and you kick the field goal, and then their coach and athletic director throw a tantrum afterwards. Like it was the perfect.
It was
I
the
get it.
meme. It was the meme. I can't wait to watch my favorite team play football. I'm going to kill myself. Oh, sweet, we won.
Yep, I get it.
We said keep that one short. It might have been our longest one.
Oh man, Arizona because of Big Noon Kickoff. What am I thinking? That's
Well, now that you mention it, we've reached a moment of the year. So now we can really boil it down to specific moments of the season. Important for the listeners and voters to differentiate between game of the year and moment of the year, because game is like the all-encompassing. Moment is like singular plays or instances that happen. So the nominees for moment are Darius Lassiter's game winner, the game-winning drive versus Utah, Kingston's punt return versus Kansas State, and Big Noon kickoff in Provo. Those are the 4 nominees.
Lassiter's game-winning touchdown is a moment I'll remember for the rest of my life.
Yeah, just for devil's advocate, I share similar feelings, but just to play devil's advocate here, Parker Kingston being what did he end up being number 1 or was he 2? Sports Center. Was he 1?
Maybe
that was viral. Like there were like
national people not associated with BYU at all who were calling that Devin Hester.
Yes, like it was so just oh no, oh yes, that the entire country watched it and said, I can't believe this. Like unbelievable play. It's going to be a dogfight between that one and the Darius Lassiter one. I can see both ends. I could argue both ends, but that's, to me, Parker Kingston, that moment was just insane.
We are once again discounting hope is lost. There's a holding penalty. Go down and kick a game-winning field goal. Utah might not be the game of the year, but I don't see how a game-winning drive and the manner in which the drive happened on the road against your rival when you're undefeated can't be moment of the year. That's just my take. And then
we've outgrown the Holy War, clearly.
Finally, we talked about all 4 of these guys already, so we'll just kind of give the nominees and then instruct people how to vote. The Hypie Heisman. We are not basing the Heisman off of snap counts. I want that on record. This is actually who the better player was. If the Hypie Awards were voted for the actual Heisman, Ashton Genty would have won. But the Hypie Heisman Award nominees for BYU are LJ Martin, Jacob Robinson, Isaiah Glasker, and Jack Kelly. Those are your 4 Hypie Heisman Award nominees. We are going to post these graphics of the nominees to Twitter with the link to vote. Go to the Google form. You can vote as many times as you would like. So if you want to be like, yes, give me Tommy Parasis, newcomer of the year, 1,000 times, by all means, do it. But voting is going to be open. I don't know when we're going to record next. Voting will be open from now until maybe like the day before we record next so that I can create graphics for the winners. But yeah, so head to our social medias, Instagram and Twitter. We'll post the links to vote for these awards. But other than that, gentlemen, some parting thoughts, words of wisdom.
There's one GOAT on that list for the Hypie Heisman. I'm just going to say that. That's my parting thought. There's one GOAT. Vote accordingly.
Go Cougs, baby.